So, Dr. You're welcome, and thank you for taking us on the Yoruba heritage classes. And we're continuing with the series. Over to you.
You are all welcome to this session. Let me share the screen without further delay. So you're welcome to this session. I believe you can see my screen, everyone. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but before we start, I'll just do a quick recap of what we learned last week. So last week we learned about a prominent Yoruba person in the name of Fela Anikulapo Kuti, or Fela Ransom Kuti. He is the progenitor of Afrobeat, which now became Afrobeats. I think, by all standards, it looks like the most prominent Yoruba musician anywhere in the world. And I also mentioned that apart from him, we've got others who are also very popular, like Shade Adu, a Yoruba person, Wale Badru, Angelique Kidjo. These are top Yoruba artists. Okay, so today we will be looking at Yoruba belief system. In the first week, remember, we said that archaeological evidence showed that Yorubas have been in existence for thousands of years, 10,000 years before Christ. Yeah, there were archaeological evidence which showed that there's a place near Akure where there were bones and skulls dating 10,000 years before the birth of Christ, which would be like 12 to 13,000 to where we are today. So this is a a generation that had been in existence for quite a while, and therefore it is not surprising that they have some solid belief systems. So many of these belief systems are rooted in Ifa mythology, in Yoruba proverbs. Okay, so that's what I will be looking at today. So basically, we will be looking at Yoruba beliefs as it relates to community life, destiny, one God, Orisha, reincarnation, and divination. But let me also state here that this is just a tip of the iceberg, because Yoruba has got belief on how to manage borrowing money, repayments, burial, naming, punishment in the community, and so on and so forth. We've got plethora of all this, but this is just to give you an idea of Yoruba belief system in general. Okay, so let's start with community life. Yoruba people believe through one of their proverb, which says that "Ojú méjì ló ń tọ́mọ, ìgbà ojú ló ń wò," which literally means that two individuals will give birth to a child, and over 200 will take care of the child. This belief system is saying that, they believe that if a child, if the society did not take care of the child will become bad and will affect the community. So they believe that if your child isn't going to school, it is the responsibility of everyone in the community to report that child so that everybody would be at peace at the end of the day. Okay, so they believe that an untrained child in the community will affect everyone negatively in the society, and therefore it is the responsibility of everyone to make sure that that child is well trained. In modern times, it is unheard of. I'm talking of the 60s and 70s and 80s. I cannot talk of what's happening now. But that period, it is unheard of that a child wouldn't go to school and the child is not articled to a trade or profession or vocation. No. Normally, it became the norm after 1952 or 53 that everybody in Yoruba land will be enrolled in school. And if at some point you cannot continue, then you should go into a trade or professional vocation. You should learn a trade, basically. So it is unheard of that somebody would be given birth to in Yoruba land and the person would not be skilled in anything. So, and they totally discourage the art of begging for money. No, it's unheard of. In fact, when I was growing up in Yoruba land, you only hear of begging for money amongst the Hausa and Fulani people who come with their cows and their animals. It is unheard of. But these days, we do hear of Yorubas begging for money anyway. But that's the Yoruba belief system, that no matter what happens, you must have some skills, some knowledge that will generate money. Okay. And in fact, also people who are involved in traditional worship, they must also learn a trade. For instance, if you're an Ifa priest, then you should also be, you can also become a farmer. You can also be a farmer. You can also, be a carver. You can be a fisherman, and so on and so forth. You cannot say, well, you're just a diviner and then you don't have work. Okay, so so they believe in community system, and they also believe in hard work. Okay, so and today, actually, when you look at the place called Nigeria, where you have one third of the area being populated by Yoruba, you will see that 60 to 70% of the revenue being generated in that country is generated in Yoruba land. And if you look at America today, when they say that I think 53% or so of migrants in that country are graduates, trust me, I think 90% of them will be Yoruba people. Okay, so let's proceed. Okay, so now let's talk about destiny. They believe that whatever we would be or whatever we would become had been predestined ever before we were born. And whenever a child is given birth to in Yoruba land, they normally do what we call a sentaye, which basically means consulting the Ifa oracle to determine what the destiny of the child will be. They normally do this 3 days after the child is born, okay, to determine what the child would be. And I think it is a system that works very much for them. So, and therefore, whatever the person later became in life, they'll say, well, it's not surprising because it has been pre-told, it's been foretold by the Ifa oracle. So they are of the belief that it is when we get here that we forget, and therefore that's the reason why divination is important, to remind us of what our destiny is. And this works for them because when a child reaches the time to learn a trade or professional vocation, they would remember what had been said about the person, and therefore they would push the person in the direction of that trade or professional vocation. Okay, then also about religion. Today we have Christianity and Islam religion being principal religion in Yoruba land, but then we also have the underlying ones. And in the underlying Yoruba belief, they believe that there is one God. And they also believe that one God created the universe. Now, the Bible talks about Adam and Eve and all that. But because today we wouldn't be able to go into, Ifa couples and everything. But in Ifa, they, demonstrated that what was written in the Bible is actually the fourth stage of creation. So what happened in the first, second, and third stage of creation were well enumerated in, if I believe. They believe that it is God that created the universe, all the planets, not only the earth. And they believe that humans are too small or too um, unskilled to come near God. And therefore, they believe that there should be some intermediary between us and God. Now, this intermediary is called Orisha. So, so in Yoruba land, there is no, until the advent of the white men, there was nothing like what we call house of God. Okay, like church or mosque, which they call house of God today. That doesn't mean that they don't reverence God, but then they believe that God is too big for anyone to build a place where he would live. But then they have intermediaries, what we call the Orishas. And, these are people or beings that act as intermediary between God and between God and humans. There are many of them. Some would say there are over 200, some would say over 400, but there are several Orishas in Yoruba land. We have Eshu, which is which is the intermediary between the Orishas themselves. They see Eshu as a trickster, and also someone who coordinates between all the Orishas. We have Ogun, which is the god of iron, god of thunder, Shango, Orushala, god of divination, which is Orunmila, and so on and so forth. There are so many of them. And when people, they are free. In families, it's normal to have someone who worships Shango and another person worshiping Ogun. And Ifa is the common source of knowledge in Yoruba land. Ifa, we're going to be talking about that in a minute. Okay, so the Orishas do not claim to be perfect, as they are human qualities, a mixture of good and bad characteristics. These mostly earth gods, who also suffer for their misdeed, might also have been incarnated into rocks, rivers, mountains, and so on. So they believe that many of those, earthly structures that we have, like a body of rivers, mountains, and so on and so forth, are actually, they became what they became from, that they were formerly human beings before they transformed into what they are. And that's why in Yoruba belief, unlike in biology, where we have living things and non-living things, in Yoruba beliefs, they believe that everything is a living thing. So in Yoruba land, we have people worshiping Oshun, which is a river goddess. We have people worshiping mountains. But please note that they are seeing this as intermediary between themselves and Olodumare, that is God Almighty. Okay. Now, we also have belief system on reincarnation. And this is captured in how we name people. For instance, Yetunde, which means mother has returned. Babatunde, which means father has returned. Iyabo, which means mama came back. So they believe that that you would reincarnate, you continually reincarnate. And in fact, that's why when someone dies, they would raise masquerade to celebrate the person, and the person will be behaving and talking like the person that died, because they believe that the person will still come back. And they also believe that unlike the Western belief, which talks about heaven and earth, that if you have done well, like I think in Matthew chapter 25, from the latter part, which says that Jesus would put the sheep on his right hand and the goat on his left hand, and that some people will go to hell, some will go to heaven. But in Yoruba belief, no. they believe that if you kill yourself, if you commit suicide, then you will be judged. But otherwise, they believe that you will continually reincarnate. Okay. So we also have the divination system. Remember, I mentioned that there are many orishas, that is intermediaries between men and God. The orisha of divination is called Ifa. Ifa actually means the word of God. And there are 256 books in Ifa, although there are 16 major ones. You see, what you've got on the screen here are the signatures of those Ifa, of the Ifa books. For instance, we have Ijogbe, Oyekumeji, and so on. So all this Meji, all this that you've seen, that you can see on the screen, you can see that the signature on the left hand is also the one on the right hand side. Okay, there are 16 of them, but then there are also combinations of the 16. 16 times 16 is 256. Yeah, in mathematics. So there are combinations of this. That is, for instance, if we have a Jogbe and Oyeku, we can have Ogbe Yeku. That is combination of the two, and so on and so forth. We have 256 of this. They are so voluminous that if they are to be documented according to some connoisseurs of Yoruba art and culture, it will take 4,000 books, because Ejogbe alone, the first one on your top left-hand side, Ejogbe has 16,000 verses. Okay, 16,000 verses. So, we're not going into the divination today, but they are taking steps to document them now. They're putting them on tape. They've been doing this since the 70s. So they're trying to make sure that it is now widely available, just like the Bible. But they said that it's going to take 4,000 books, almost a library, to document them. Okay, so there are 3 or 4 stages in learning this. So once you learn up to the level 3, then you will be certified as a Babalawo, and it takes 12 years training. Yeah, to get this trained, to get to know about this, to learn these skills properly. So all the Yoruba divination takes place through what we call the Ifa corpus, that you've got on the screen here. So these are some of the Yoruba beliefs. As I've said, there are several of them. We have a belief system on burial, on naming. We have on lending money, borrowing money, and so on and so forth. But this is just a snapshot, just to give you an idea. But if you've got questions on any of this that had been discussed here, or any other, actually, this is to kickstart discussion in this area. So thank you very much. So I'm all yours for question and answers.
So yeah, I have a question. Well, this is Nike. I have a question regarding the Babalawo and Iyalawo. So you said they are the people that keep secrets, or what? Can you explain more? Because what I thought Babalawo was, we call them herbalists, that you go to do things maybe to make you sick, or sorry, to make you well, or to make somebody else sick. Basically the dark forces is what I thought they were.
Thank you very much for that very valid question. Strictly speaking, Babalawo is somebody who is versed in the 256 chapters of Ifa. Ifa means the voice of God. So whoever has gone through that training, that's 12-year training, sometimes 8 years, 12 or 16, depending on how brilliant you are, you will then graduate, and then you can do divination for others. That's strictly what Babalawo is. And they do divination through what we call Okbele, or Ikin. Ikin are sacred palm nuts. So those are Babalawo. Any other person is not Babalawo, strictly speaking. And it's very important I say this because today, whenever you say herbalist, you say Babalawo. Whenever you hear of somebody using people for sacrifice, you say Babalawo. This is akin to someone going into a hospital and seeing a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist, a lab technician, and saying, oh, all of them are doctors. So not all of them are doctors, but strictly speaking, someone who has gone through 16 years training, knowledgeable. In fact, it's for brilliant people. I have a friend who is a PhD holder in engineering, and he's also a Babalawo. So it's for brilliant people who can memorize 256 books to an extent. So some would know it to an extent, and if a divination comes up, they can also consult their friends and so on and so forth. But that's strictly who Babalawo is. But then we have Onishegun, we have Adaunshi, we have Olosoyin. So people who engage in charms maybe to prevent bullets from entering you and so on. Those are people who deal in Osoyin. And that's Osoyin, basically. And then, so when people talk of Sunday Igboho, oh, bullets cannot reach him and so on, they're actually referring to Osoyin belief system. But then we also have herbalists. These are people who train in use of leaves to cure. What I understand is that, because I took time to listen to an interview, people who are knowledgeable in this area, and they said that to be a herbalist, you need 1 year training, basically 6 months to 1 year, basically 1 year training. But to become a Babalawo, to become somebody who can do divination, you have to go through tutelage, 8 years or 12 years or 16 years training. So that's the difference. But then people categorize all of them as Babalawo, but the truth is, it is people who use Ikin, that is sacred palm nuts, or Okpele for divination. Those are the true Babalawo. I hope I've been able to answer that question.
Yes, excellent explanation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Posi. And also, that was a great question from Nike. So on that same thread, speaking of that thread, so is it fair? I never understood this until you broke it down this way. So, and the way you explain it, it looks like it sounds like the way I'm interpreting it is like Babalawo is like the what do you call them in the Bible again? The name just came in and I forgot.
Well, let me help.
Those guys are always challenging Jesus in the Bible. Those the Pharisees. Is it like the Pharisees? Yes, those are the like the Pharisees, that because they had to go through a lot of training and all that stuff, and they were in depth with the laws and the scrolls and all that stuff, right? They were really in depth in that stuff, right? And that's why they were always challenging Jesus when, But
let me explain that a little bit more. When Jesus came, they have their own Jewish belief system.
Yes.
Yeah? So they still have that till today. I hope you know that only 1.5 or 2% of Jewish people are Christians.
Absolutely.
They are not. They are mainly Jewish.
Yes.
And there was a time when I supervised one of my students who had to go into their temple, and then I watched whenever he returns, I watch whatever goes on in the temple, and I discovered that the same way that Muslims abuse Christians, could be more in the same way Jewish also abuse Christians. That how can someone give birth, without a father and everything? So, their own, it is their own, that Jewish religion that was being challenged there. It has absolutely nothing to do with, because Jesus was trying to, start his own philosophy. So that has nothing to do with Ifa. But the nearest thing to that is 1 Kings chapter 30. There's a place in 1 Kings chapter 30 where David came back from, no, 1 Samuel chapter 30, actually, 1 Samuel chapter 30. He came back from a war and discovered that his wives and children had been taken away. So, and they said that they cried until they couldn't cry anymore. And that some people now said, they thought about stoning him. And they now said, verse 7 says, and David said unto Abiathar, the priest, Abimelech's son, I pray thee bring hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover. Some people have said, some have said, but not me, some have said that is divination, that ephod is divination. I think you're just a Google away from finding out what ephod is, but I've not tried, but perhaps after today, I will Google what ephod is, but that is the nearest to divination. But in Yoruba land, when you hear people bearing names like Fashakin, Falaye, and so on and so forth, that means that they are people who are adherents of Ifa belief. You know, so for instance, I came from a family whereby the family in Ire, they are the custodians of Ifa. So I'm supposed to be bearing one Ifa name like that. So that's that's Ifa. Ifa is the custodian of knowledge. I think in Ewe, our neighbors towards Ghana, they call it Afa. But basically that is what it is. It's about knowledge. It's about knowledge, and it is rooted in a belief that we all reincarnate. Okay, because those things that if you listen to the divination, you see they will say things like, okay, when this happened to Oromila, it did this, it did this. So they believe that thing is happening again, and when it happens again, this is what you will do. So there are combinations of hundreds of thousands of things that could happen, and the sacrifice that they ought to do whenever those things are about to occur. So that's if I believe it has the nearest to it is what I've just explained to you now, which is what they call ephod in the Bible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're muted, Shaya, you're muted.
Thank you so much. Anybody else got any other questions? That was really insightful, really, in our family, we have, we have Fashokun. I think that originates from some sort of, I'm not picking up.
It does, yes.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, Ifashokun.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Debola alluded to it last week or so.
Yeah, brother last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people change their names when they become Christians, to get away from the meaning of their last names or their first names that allude to, that's Yoruba religion. So I do have some friends who have some similar names and they've changed theirs to biblical names. So some people do that.
Yeah, they change first names, they change family names. I'm not keen on that, actually. I'm not keen on when people change their family names because you're losing part of your heritage.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, to Nike's point, even in the Bible, the people changes their name. Like look at Saul to Paul. And there are a lot of people that, when they converted, right, when you have that, what do you call it? When you have the experience with Jesus, they change their name. So the one that comes to mind is just Saul and Paul. But I think there are a few more in the Bible like that. And to Nike's point, I think it's a personal experience. But I've also observed, I don't know about you guys, a lot of my friends living abroad are now going back to Ifa. I mean, like big time, right? They just
I have some friends like that too.
There's a movement going on. I don't know. I think there's a movement going on in Nigeria right now. I don't know if the influence, and it has to do with the influence from the West, because a lot of people are paying attention to the Yoruba culture right now. So, and I don't know if they're connected, if there's a correlation, but yeah, I do have friends that are moving towards that stuff right now. Even when I was in abroad, I lived in Jamaica for 5 years. That was the guy I saw him with the book of Ifa. I'm a Jamaican, he came to me and said, "You're Nigerian?" I said, "Yes." And he showed me this book, massive, like I'll say it's over 1,000 pages. I was blown away. I'm like, even me in Yoruba, I've never seen that in my life, you know? So yeah, it's big, man. This thing is big. It's big. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I was very late to this today. But I don't know if this, to what extent this was covered, but I just had a question on Elodumare. And if you already spoke at length about it, I'll just maybe wait for the recording. But I just was curious to know, I know that I believe the closest thing the Yorubas had to maybe an all-present God like we have, what God means to Christians and Muslims today, one is Eledumare. Is that in the same vein? I don't know if you guys talked about that, but was that in the same vein as the way God is looked at as this all present creator? And
absolutely, yes. And as I've said, because of time, I wouldn't be able to go into some, explanations here. But in Yoruba, now this is talking of if I believe now, they believe that they have records about all the things that God created, not just the earth. So they believe that the Bible was talking about the fourth stage in creation, and that there were things that happened long before then. But in any case, now to answer your question directly, yes, Yorubas believe in Olodumare. Olodumare, the literal interpretation is someone who has many odus. Big odu. Odu means like ikoko or pots. Someone who has big pots, so someone who has many big pots. He has many big pots from where he can dish out gifts, basically. Olodumare. And they believe that there are certain people that have been beatified in Yoruba land, for instance, Ogun, because of the wonderful things that they had done, Oya, and so on. So they believe that, well, if they have been beatified, that is, they've done things that others couldn't do, that they would be appropriate channel, to get to God. For instance, it is believed that the first person to mine iron, to use iron to do welding or goldsmith work in Yoruba land is Ogun. And therefore, he is highly reverenced, and, he has worshippers. And, those people connect to God through Ogun. So always they do appreciate the fact that there is God, but they believe that God is too big for anybody to build house for him. I heard this from a Yoruba scholar recently, Professor Wande Abimbola. Obviously, you may have heard of his name. He's a former vice chancellor of Obafemi Awolowo University. He's also an Ifa adherent. He's a Babalawo. He said that they believe in Yoruba land is that God is too big for anyone to build a house for him. And therefore, there was never anywhere called house of God in Yoruba land before the advent of Christianity and Islamic religion. So to answer your question, yes, they believe that there is God up there. They also believe that there are Orishas. And amongst the Orishas, they also believe that there is an arch Orisha called Ori. Now, our belief system here is somewhat similar to that of the Igbos, our neighbors. The Igbos believe that everybody has his own chi, C-H-I. If you've read Chinua Achebe, you would have heard about this. Now, everybody has his own chi, which is Ori, and that is typified by Ikenga. There's a carving which that is called Ikenga in Igbo land. So in Yoruba land too, they believe that everyone is distinct. So if you are to plead to your God, you plead your Ori, you appease your Ori, you appease your Eleda or your Ori. So amongst the Orishas, amongst whether Oya or Ogun or whatever, they believe that Ori is the Ak Orisha, which means that this is a complex one, because remember, we believe that there is a God. Yoruba believe that there is God. They also believe that everyone's Ori, everyone's God is different. I don't know how to explain that. So that's their belief system. That amongst the Orisha, we have Ori, which is the Ak Orisha. And I don't want to call it small God, because this is a Western creation that people worship lesser God and so on. But that's the Yoruba belief, that everyone's Ori is different. So you can appease your Ori, basically. I don't want to go so much into the depth. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
No, that does, and that's very interesting, actually. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, it kind of tracks with saying that, we're all kind of made in God's image or something too, but, even with that system, it just takes it maybe a little bit different from there on, but that's very interesting. Yeah, thank you.
I think that's it. Yomi, did you have one last question?
Yeah, this is
okay, and Makonjola also has a question.
Okay, Makonjola should go first then, because I've been talking a lot. Yeah.
Okay, Makonjola.
Excuse me, is that where the Oriki comes from?
No. Oriki has to do with your lineage. Talking about where you came from. For instance, we have the Oriki Jesha, Oriki Ife, Oriki Ikoyesho, Olofamojo. These were, towns that had been in existence for thousands and thousands of years. So if your Oriki is Olofamojo, which means that your generations are from Ofa. If your Oriki is Irenimogun, it means that your progenitors are from Iri, Ekiti. If your Oriki is Ijesha, surely you are from one of those Ijesha lands. And if it's Opomulero, it means that you're somewhere from Oyon in Kwara State. So it talks about, it's one of the ways by which we can deduce where your origin is. There are people in Ibadan, in Abeokuta and so on and so forth, that will have Oriki, which connects them to Olofamojo or Ire Nimugun or Ijesha or Iwo. So that tells us that their forefathers are from those places, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Posse. That was a very interesting and detailed session. And family, can we just give
I think
Dr.
Max
Posse
wants to ask a question. I think he wants to ask a question. I think Max wants to ask a question. Remember?
Oh, you mean Jutalayo, Yomi? Do you want to have one last question?
Yeah.
Wrap up?
Sorry, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it fair to say that, like in Yoruba culture, you have the god of thunder, you have the god of Shango, and then when you look at the Viking or whatever, they also have god of thunder too there. You look at the Greeks, there's similar god deities across all these cultures. I mean, what do you see about that? I mean, like the similarities. You almost feel like they were talking to each other, all these different cultures. I don't know.
I see. I must confess that I'm not a connoisseur of, I know just a little. It might be, but anytime this kind of issue has been discussed, I always want us to discuss it in context, to also look at, since when have those people been in existence. That will make us to have a deeper understanding of who copied who. For instance, when talking of Oduduwa, people say, oh, Oduduwa came from heaven and so on. That's all nonsense. But we have Benin people bearing Okodua, Eredua, Oduduwa. So which, and there are stories which shows that Oduduwa reigned in Ife, his son reigned in Benin. So there's a connection there. I don't know. And I'm not a student of archaeology, so I don't know how long Greece has been in existence. Recently, Professor Sophie Oluwole, before she died, wrote a book comparing, I've got the book here, I can show you, but it's unnecessary, that compared Socrates to Orunmila. Just one second. Okay, so this book, perhaps you may do well to get this book, and read more about it. But I don't really, the answer is I don't know whether there's a connection between those. But the Ifa corpus has been in existence for thousands of years. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Some people are raising their hands here.
Jolie?
Hi. I was just going to say sort of on that question about the Greeks. So they actually tackle that in this book, Sapiens. I don't know if anyone here has read it. It sort of just looks at the history of all humans. But most, sort of older, like human societies, like Yoruba people, Greeks, Romans, all of that, they had polytheistic religions. And that was often just sort of reflective of kind of like technology at the time and looking at explanations for, different events such as weather and that kind of thing. And then where you sort of see the rise then in the East of like monotheistic religions, that then sort of spread along with kind of the way that spread was also reflective of kind of the changes in society. So I don't think that it's necessarily that, the Greeks copied the Yorubas or the Yorubas copied the Greeks or anything like that. It was just more that it was sort of a commonplace narrative to explain the world. And that's why there are so many similarities.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
So someone is, I think it's Tumi Ujutalayo who is raising her hand there.
Hello, yes, thank you. So part of the discussions while we were, you were talking, and the question Yomi also asked, my husband and I were here listening, and we were also trying to, in our own way, think about the things you were saying, and then we were discussing. And in our discussions, it was funny, Yomi asked the question he asked, because he's all the way in Canada and we're in Philadelphia area. But he asked precisely something that me and him were talking about while you were speaking. We were talking about, so you had mentioned Shango and the god of, Shango is the god of iron, or is it? Or thunder. And then there's also, with the Greek gods, they also have their own god of thunder that they call Thor. So literally, just before Yomi asked, my husband and I were saying, so how is it that the Yorubas have their own god of thunder, they call Shango? And then there's also the Greek side where they have Thor, god of thunder. Did they communicate? How is it that this happened? They didn't communicate, but this happened. So Yomi asked that. We were talking about that here too. This is the conclusion we came to. We just speculating. This is what came to my mind. So is it possible that there was a period in time, just like in biblical times, we had people that God had given special skills to accomplish special tasks? For example, Samson in the Bible. God had given him extraordinary strength to accomplish the mission the Lord sent him for. There was also Moses. God gave him extraordinary knowledge and wisdom that he did things that men today haven't done. He parted the Red Sea. There was also Elijah. He prayed, fire came down. So is it possible that people like this Shango and also Thor could be similar to these great prophets, where they were specific people for a specific period of time that came with special skills and talents to accomplish special missions? And for some reason, human beings, being who humans are, will just, like you said, venerate them to the point where they just become gods. So there was Thor in the Greek side, the one their own Shango god. On our side too, we also have Shango and the rest of them, you know. So because there's somewhere in the Bible where God said to Moses, I won't let the people know where I'm going to bury you, so that they won't begin to worship you as a god. So is it possible that a lot of these so-called gods were people that had skills that God had given them, but for some reason, further down the line, all across the world, human beings began to see them as gods and started worshiping them as gods?
The answer is yes, absolutely. You've said it all. Yes, they are people who accomplished extraordinary tasks. You know, for instance, Ogun. You know, there's one verse of Ifa which says, I don't know whether I should go into it, but they said that so they believe that he is the one that, you know, created path, you know, and he is the one that first used cutlass, is the first that started the work of goldsmith. So because of that, they now say, there is somebody who should be deified or beatified, as the case may be. The same thing with Ogun, Shango. In the case of Shango, we understand that there is the mythical Shango, who is the god of thunder. There's also the Shango, who was the second or third Alaafin of Oyo after Oromiyan, that his brother Dada was chased away from the throne, and then he became Alaafin, and he was spitting fire from his mouth. So there is the mythical Shango. There's also the Shango who was the former Alaafin for you. So basically, all of them, for instance, Oya was the wife of, I understand it's the wife of Shango, and she became River Niger. That's what they said. So that's River Oya. There's River Oshun. They all have roles to play. I don't know the stories, but there are stories behind what they did. There's Morimi. There's a place called Ira in Kwara State. So there's this young lady who was married off to the Alaafin of Oyo then. And Alaafin, being someone who is a warrior, also went to reign in Ife. And then, you know, another king came, but then she was abandoned. And so there's this long story. And then she was the one that saved Ife people from Ugbo people. So because of this, they now kind of deified Morimi. So many of the people who became Orisha were actually people who lived, but then because they accomplished extraordinary tasks, they became beatified, as it were. So I would say that if Professor Soyinka had existed thousands of years ago, perhaps whenever he lives, he would be beatified, or Fela would have been beatified. So because they were, first and foremost, human beings who had lived, but because they did something that others, maybe they pioneered something, or they saved their people, they now thought, well, this person should be the appropriate person to be used as intermediary between ourselves and Olodumare, who we cannot see. That's the answer. Thank you. And again, let me also say this, just an addendum, that I don't know what happens in Greece, but here we have so many gods, just like the Greeks. They have god of wine, Dennis. They have all sorts of gods. In Yoruba land, there's a woman called Elspeth Huxley. I don't know whether you've heard of her. I can write her name in the chat room in case you want to read more about her. But then she wrote a book called 4 Guineas, A Journey Through West Africa. I don't know whether you've heard about this book before. 4 Guineas, A Journey Through West Africa. Now, in that book, I've got the book here in this library, but in that book was written, I think, in the 1950s. But she said something interesting about the Yorubas. Because she toured Senegal to Guinea to Ivory Coast to Gold Coast, then called Gold Coast, and Igbo land, Yoruba land, Hausa. And she said, one wonderful thing about the Yorubas is that people who belong to different faiths would sit down under moonlight and eat and marry. That this is something that should be copied by advanced scientists. She wrote this in 4 Guineas, A Journey Through West Africa. Her name is Elspeth Huxley. I'm going to write it in the chat room here. Elspeth Huxley. I think she later became a baron. She was a journalist, a prominent journalist in London. So what I'm trying to say here is that as we have a plethora of intermediaries between ourselves and God, it has never been heard in history that people would fight or kill themselves on the basis of religion. Thank you.
Can I say one quick thing too? Just one last addition. So today we could almost say Elon Musk is like our modern day Shango, because right now he's on a mission to colonize Mars. And on Twitter, people are literally, on even places around the world, people are literally worshiping Elon Musk. So you can almost say he's like a Shango of our time.
Beautiful. Exactly. Right.
Thank you, everybody. On that note, I'm not sure about Elon Musk and the equivalent of Shango. Do we want to end the recording?
Yes. So